your warp is. In this case, I just have to lash from here to here. We're doing this to prevent these rods from bowing. If we don't put any interlacing in between here and we get lots of tension on the warp, then this rod will start to bow and that will change the tension on your warp. We don't want that to happen. So if I don't get this right the first time, you can always add more. Sometimes I have to add more. Just half hitch another cord on. But I've taken a chunk of yarn, of thread, of seine twine to be precise. That's probably 3 yards long, and I folded it in half. I'm going to half hitch this to the apron rod. Voila. Now I'm going to just interlace it about every 2 inches along here and anchor them. So here goes the first one. I don't count threads or anything, I just eyeball it. There we go. There we go. This gives lots of good strength back here. So make sure whatever yarn you use or cord you use is a good strong one. Don't use singles homespun or hand spun. Alrighty, our last one. Oh, am I good? Look at that, I cut it just the right length. Now I'm going to just tug. Threads have been disturbed and you give the warp a good tug. It causes the least sticks to bow a little bit, but they're just bowing as I pull, and when you release it, everything's fine. It does make everything bow back there, but it's no big deal. Nothing's going to break. Pull out anything that's messy. I have this disgusting technique called licking your fingers and pulling your warp threads down. You don't have to do that. There we go. So this is nice and perfect and straight, and now I'm going to wind it on. I'm going to do it all by myself. I have this trusty roll of paper, and we're going to use it between all the layers of the warp. I personally prefer paper to sticks because I find that our warps are long and we run out of sticks, and you get lazy with sticks. But if you have a good roll of paper and you get it in straight, then it just is always there, a flatbed between every layer of warp, and your warp is wound on well. So let's look at our brake system a little bit. Earlier on, I eased off this nut on the threaded screw here that controls the friction band around the brake. I did that so that we could move this beam back and forth without any problems. What we don't want to have happen is when I start beaming the warp and then put tension on it, I don't want to pull on the warp and have the whole thing come off the beam again. So luckily we have this little toggle here. This little toggle engages a ratchet on the back side of this chunk of wood right here. This little toggle just fits down snugly and locks the system so that the warp can't be pulled off again. I have this toggle on and engaged when I'm warping the loom, but when I go to weave, I want the toggle off. So the only time we want to engage this is when we're warping it, and it prevents the warp from being pulled off while we're winding on and tensioning. It holds the beam so that when I pull on the other side, this can't move. It can go in one direction, but it can't go back. So that's great. I'm ready to beam this warp. I'm going to beam it with paper. At my local post office, I got this lovely piece of paper for $2.95. Isn't it lovely? It has little chickadees on it. You can get it with party hats and other things. But we're using this paper because it's nice and firm and sort of rigid, which is what we want. So I'm going to start winding this on. You could use this little handle here. That's what it was put there for. But I like to just use my hands. I get my first wrap around, and as soon as I am about to come up to my second wrap, I put the paper in. I make sure that the paper goes in nice and straight. If you get it in straight, it's easy to keep it straight. If you don't get it in straight, it's hard. Life's bad. So I'm going to line it up with my apron rod. I was very careful to make sure that the apron rod and the warp rod were parallel to each other and that they were perfectly straight. So if I line my paper up to that, then we're just hunky-dory. So we're ready. The paper's going in, and I'm going to go to the front of the loom so that I can give it a good pull and tug and straighten out anything and see what's happening up here. When I come here, I pull on that warp, I tug on it. If I have to do anything, it's generally just a little flick, flick, flick. Give it a good tug, lay it down flat, come back here, and wind some more. My paper's going on nice and straight. Because I got it in nice and straight. If your paper starts wandering off its track, again, lick your fingers and just hold it. You've got a little friction there, and you can push it back on track. There. I'm going to go to the front, give it some more tension.